Hi everyone! Welcome back to Boarding School with Brandy. I'm Brandy, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to play the 1 to 6 player game, Hadrian's Wall. In this game, players become Roman generals, building and maintaining a mile castle as well as the attached wall, and trying to make their section of the Roman Empire prosperous by attracting civilians. You have 6 years to try to gain the most points on your path cards and your attribute tracks, while also trying to avoid losing points from disdain. Setup for this game is pretty quick. The first thing you want to do is grab the Fate deck. It's got the 3 characters on the back. Go ahead and shuffle that deck up and then place it in the middle of the table where everyone can reach. Next, you'll create the general supply by just putting the resources and all the workers where everyone can reach. The resources and workers in this game are meant to be unlimited, so if you run out of anything, just use something to substitute. Next, each player will choose a color and get the 12 cards in their chosen color. I'll go with red. Each player also gets the 2 pieces to their player board. The 2 sheets. One has civilian tracks on the side and the other has attribute tracks at the bottom. Go ahead and place the one with the attribute tracks to your left and the one with the civilian tracks to your right, and assemble your player board right above that. You'll notice that there are 6 slots that are numbered 1 through 6. Those indicate the 6 years that you're going to play through in this game. Each player is also going to need something to write with. You'll want to shuffle your player cards and then just place them to the left of your player mat. This is where they will live for the rest of the game, and this will be the draw pile that you are drawing from at the beginning of every year. If you were playing a game with 3 to 6 players, your setup would be complete right here. But I'm going to be playing a game with 1 player, so I'm also going to add in 2 extra decks of player cards to bring me up to 3 players, basically. If you were playing a 2-player game, you would put out 1 set of extra player cards, and like I said, that brings you up to 3 players. This is important because throughout the game, you are able to buy goods and patterns for scouting from your neighbors to your left and to your right. But in a 1 to 2-player game, you don't have those neighbors to your left and to the right, so these AI decks give you the opportunity to buy different goods and patterns that you wouldn't have on your personal prospect cards. The last thing players need to do during setup is decide on a difficulty level. If we take a look at our player mat, we'll notice on each year there are 4 banners. There's a gray banner to the left, and then 3 banners to the right, green, yellow, and red. Green is easy, yellow is medium, and red is hard. When you look into the later years, you will notice that medium and hard start drawing more cards than easy as soon as year 2. The gray banner is going to tell you how much valor or disdain you could potentially get at the end of each year during the attack if you are not able to block it. The rules recommend starting with an easy game, which is what we're going to do here today. So during the attack at the end of the year, we will be drawing the number of cards shown in the green banner on whatever year we're on. As I mentioned, the game is played over 6 years, or rounds, and at the beginning of each year, all players collect workers and resources from various places, and then all players take actions at the same time by spending workers and resources and marking off spaces on their player sheets. At the end of the actions portion of the year, all unused resources and workers are returned to the general supply. So you don't get to keep anything from year to year. So my advice is to use everything that you possibly can. Once all players have taken their actions for the year, there will be an attack that all players have to defend. And they will be judged based upon how well they defend it and receive valor or disdain, depending on if they are able to block the hits. To begin each year, a player will flip over the top card of the Fate deck. It doesn't matter which player does this, there's no turn order. And all players will receive all of the workers and resources shown on the middle of this card. There are 2 of each type of worker, except for yellow, so I will grab 2 of each type of worker, and 1 of yellow, and 1 resource, and place those on my player mat. Then players will also get the resources and workers shown on their player sheet. When you start the game, you only have 1 resource production, so go ahead and take 1 resource and place it on your player sheet. But you can see throughout the game, you'll be able to fill in more of these circles by mining, and you'll receive more resources at the beginning of the year because of this. Also throughout the game, you will be building hotels, workshops, and roads that are going to give you additional workers or additional attribute points at the beginning of each year. Next, each player will draw 2 cards from the top of their deck and select 1 to be a path card for final scoring and 1 to be a prospect card for workers, resources, goods, and scout patterns. I selected merchant and fighter. They have the same scout pattern, but the note on the path portion of the cards are for collected goods or completed cohorts. I am going to go ahead and choose the merchant card for my path card and plan to collect goods throughout this game, and I'll just go ahead and place that face down on my number 1 spot. And then I'm choosing the fighter card to be my prospect card, so I'll place that face down on the right side of my player mat. If we were playing with more than one player, we would wait for all players to select their prospect and path card, and once all cards are face down, we could flip them up, leaving the prospect card to the right of our player mat and sliding the path card right underneath the first year, so we can only see the information about our final scoring. Now we'll also take any resources or workers that are shown in the bottom left corner of our prospect cards and place them on our player mat. If we were playing a 3 to 6 player game, we would be ready to begin taking actions. However, since we're playing a 1 player game, now we also need to flip up the top card of the AI decks. If it was a 2 player game, we would only flip 1 over, and if it was a 3 player game, we would already have enough players to not need to do this. If we take a look at the Ranger card we flipped over for the blue AI deck, we can see the pattern and the good that are available for use throughout our actions phase. If we decided to use one of these, we would take the worker or resource we used to pay for that action and place it on this card. And then at the end of the year, when we were resolving our attack, we would draw an additional fate card for each resource or worker on either of these cards. So they are handy to have, and you will need to probably purchase their goods if you're trying to complete the path card that I've chosen, because you need unique numbered goods in order to score on that, which we'll talk about more later. But you will have to be prepared to defend your cohorts against an extra attack. Once players have collected all of their resources and workers, it's time to start taking actions. As I mentioned, actions are taken by returning a requisite number of goods or resources to the general supply and then marking off a section of your player sheet. Sometimes those sections will give you additional benefits, such as marking off another section or getting a new worker or resource. And if you do cover up one of those, take that extra benefit immediately. Actions all happen simultaneously. There's no player interaction except for the occasional buying of a scout pattern or good from each other. If you are playing with more than one player and you buy a good or pattern from another player, you place the worker or resource that you use to pay for that on their card, just like you would with the AI deck, except instead of drawing an extra card at the end of the round during the attack, that player gets to use that good or resource. They don't get to save it till the next round though, so they need to use it the round that they earn it. Before we actually get into taking actions though, we need to take a closer look at these sheets. Mostly the sheets are going to be made up of tracks that you need to fill in from left to right. But there are going to be some other buildings on the right sheet mostly that we'll cover once we get there. But first, let's look at the left sheet with the attribute tracks on the bottom. At the top of this sheet, you'll see your 3 cohorts, the left, center, and right cohort. These are the spaces that you need to fill in order to protect from the attacks at the end of the year. You're able to fill them in when you fill in a box with this symbol, like on the wall guard, sippy, or wall tracks. These are all considered tracks, but they are 3 separate tracks, so you can choose to fill in the left, center, or right cohort when you fill in one of these spaces, but you do have to fill it in left to right. Likewise, all of the mining, wall guard, sippy, wall, and fort tracks need to be filled in left to right. In the mining and foresting area, you can turn in 1 purple worker in order to fill in 1 box. The box will either be the square or the rectangle. When you fill in a rectangle, you see the hammer icon and a resource icon. That means you would fill in a resource production down here on this track, as well as take a resource from the supply and put it on your player board if you filled that in. It all counts as 1 space. On the wall guard track, still filling in left to right, you can either fill in something with a sword icon, such as on the training grounds, or turn in a black worker to fill in 1 of the spaces on this track. If you filled in this first space, you would immediately get to fill in a space on your cohort. On the sippy track, you just need to turn in 1 resource to fill in 1 of the spaces, and if you fill in a space with a benefit, take that benefit immediately. You also turn in 1 resource to fill in a space on the wall. You can either turn in a blue worker or a black worker to fill in a space on the fort, And now that we're looking at the fort, we might notice the small granary, medium granary, and large granary. These granaries are all connected to a third of all of these tracks. You'll see the little line that goes up signifying where it ends. You start the game with the small granary already built, meaning you can fill in any of these tracks if you turn in the correct resource. However, you can't start filling in any of these tracks in the second section until you've built your medium granary. And you can't build your medium granary until this one icon is filled in. So you would have needed to build on your fort at least one time before you can build your medium granary and then start filling in any of these sections of track. Likewise, you would need your large granary to be built to start filling in the third section of these tracks. The Sippy and the wall tracks have an additional prerequisite to the granaries being built, and that is you need to have filled in the fort up to where the space you want to fill in on the Sippy or the wall is connected to. You can see each wall and Sippy space is attached to the fort by a chain. You do not need to fill in the wall spaces before you fill in the Sippy spaces that are technically ahead of them on the track, but you do need to have reached that section of your fort track in order to fill in this space on the Sippy. Resource production is also a track that needs to be filled in left to right. The only way to fill in your resource production is by filling in some other part of your sheet that has a hammer icon. And then it tells you right here that you will get 1 resource per year for each dot that you've filled in on the resource track. The training grounds is another track that you should fill in left to right. On this track, you can turn in 1 blue worker to fill in 1 space on your wall guard. That is what this sword icon indicates if you look up on your wall guard up here. This number sign in the second section of the training ground tells you that you can only do this training once per year, and it also notes that over here. So when you use the training ground, turn in 1 blue worker, fill in a section of your wall guard, the next one available on your track, and put the number of the year that you used it in over the number sign so that you remember not to use that training ground again that year. Now we have some buildings that are a little bit different. You don't fill these in left to right like tracks. However, they do have prerequisites. For example, the small hotel tells you you need to have made it to the second banner on your fort track in order to trade in these resources and build the small hotel. Once you build the small hotel, you'll fill in this little circle to remind yourself that you'll get a yellow worker each year, and you'll also fill this in and immediately grab a yellow worker. Likewise, if you reach the 6th banner on your fort track and you want to build your large hotel, turn in the depicted resources, fill in this dot, and fill in the whole rectangle here, getting yourself a renown and a yellow worker, and that'll earn you 2 yellow workers at the beginning of each year after that's built. The same goes for the workshops, except you need to reach levels 3 and 7 to build those, and you need a lot more resources to build them, and those will give you blue workers. The roads come in handy because they give you the benefit of allowing you to choose 1 attribute to fill in at the beginning of each year for each spot that you fill in. The landmarks are attached to your attribute rows. So in order to build the archway, you need to reach the orange banner on the renown track, which is the 15th spot. Once you reach that, then you can turn in the depicted resources to build the archway and get 2 valor. The monolith means you need to reach the 15th spot on piety. The column, you need to reach the 15th spot on valor. And statue, you need to reach the 15th spot on the discipline track. Once again, you don't automatically get those. Once you reach the 15th spot on those attribute track, you turn in the depicted resources and then fill in the rectangle next to it and take those benefits. The last building on this left sheet is the forum. You can use this once per year, similar to the training ground. And on this one, you turn in 2 of the same type of worker to get 1 of a different worker. It's not the most efficient building, so I try not to use it at all unless I'm really in a pinch and I wouldn't be able to use the 2 workers I turn in at all otherwise. And you cannot use your black warrior workers for this, either to trade in or to receive. Since you can only use this forum once a year, make sure you write the year over the number sign to remind yourself not to use it again that year. You'll notice that the training grounds and the forum only have 4 spots available, so you can't use them 6 times. So not only are they only available once per year, they're not available every year either. Finally, we have the attribute tracks: Renown, Piety, Valor, and Discipline. The way you fill in these tracks is by filling in other sections of your sheets where these symbols are shown. As soon as you fill in those symbols on those other sections of the sheet, you will come right over here and fill in the leftmost available space, receiving a worker if you cover it up, and later in the game receiving other attribute benefits. You'll also notice the red banners at the bottom of these tracks. That's how many points you're going to score at the end of the game if you make it that far in the track. The bottom left portion of the sheet is where you keep track of your disdain that you earn from not defending attacks. When you fail to defend an attack, you circle one of these dotted lines for each hit that you fail to block. If later in the game you're able to wash away disdain in the bathhouse, you'll then fill it in and it won't count as a disdain against you at the end of the game. You'll also notice down here this is where you will be doing your final scoring, but you don't do that until the end of the game. The sheet to your right is going to have your 5 citizen tracks as well as the attached buildings. We're going to talk about the buildings in a second, but first let's go over the actual citizens tracks and how those work. Each citizen track is a track that works just like the tracks on the left sheet. You need to fill them in left to right, always filling in the leftmost available space. And you can either turn in a yellow worker to fill in the leftmost space on any of the tracks, or you'll fill it in when you receive the matching icon from other activities throughout the game. These numbers are going to correspond with prerequisites of using the buildings attached to that track. So once you have filled in the first spot on the priest track, you're able to build the small temple. And then once your small temple is built, then you can use the small temple. We'll talk more about that later. So let's take a look at the traders and their buildings. The first building that they have available is the small precinct. You need to make it to the 3rd banner on the trader track in order to build your small precinct. And once you've made it there, then you turn in a purple and yellow worker to fill in this entire rectangle and gain all of those benefits. You have to build these in order, so you could not build the large precinct before the medium or small precinct, even if you were already on level 9 of the citizens track. The second type of building that the traders have is called the market. You need to make it to level 4 on the traders track in order to build the market by trading in a purple and a blue worker and 2 resources. Once you've built the market, you'll fill in this square here, and that signifies that you're able to use your market on your next action if you have the resources available. You need to have made it to a certain level on your banners on the traders track in order to use the different slots. Take a resource from your player mat and return it to the general supply. You would find that in the bottom right corner of your prospect card, and you would write that number in the space available next to the banner that you're able to use. The way this gets you points is every time you put in a different number, you're going to score on your renown attribute track. So if I were to use my prospect card and write a 5 here, I would immediately get 1 renown. And if I used my blue AI 6 and I was on the 5th banner, I would be able to write a 6 here. So I would have 2 different numbers and I would again score a renown. The Fate deck also has a good that you're allowed to purchase. All you would need to do if you chose to use that good is return your resource to the general supply and then write the number next to the good on the Fate deck. The goal in this building is to trade different numbered goods. The numbers available are 1 through 6, and you can see for the first 3 different numbers that you fill in, you get 1 renown, and then for the 4th and 5th different number, you would get 2, and on the 6th different number, you would get 3 renown. Next, let's take a look at the theater. In order to build the theater, you would need to be on the first banner of your performers track and turn in a purple worker and a blue worker and a resource. Once you've done that, you would fill in this box, earn a renown, and you would be able to put on shows in your theater. Again, you need to have reached a certain level on your performers track in order to use each line in your theater. So for the first one, you would have needed to reach the first banner. You would return 1 resource to the main supply. And you would fill this box into here, receiving 1 spot on your trader's track. And once again, you have a number sign here indicating that you can only do this once per round. So you would put the round or year number that you're in over the number sign. Reminder down here that you can only put on 1 performance per year. The next building attached to the performers is the gladiators. You will notice that you can only do 1 battle per year, indicated in the text down here, as well as the numbers on the columns of the gladiators. This is the local arena where gladiators can prepare for battles at the real Colosseum. But before they can do that, you would need to reach level 3 on your performers track, trade in these workers and resources to build this small town Colosseum. You'd receive 1 renown for doing so. Once you've built the Ludus Gladiatorius, you'll train your gladiators by turning in purple or yellow workers and filling in these circles so that they are empty but not dotted lines anymore. So say I turned in 2 purple workers, I could train my red gladiator 2 times. Then I could decide that I'm sending him off to battle. I have to write the year over here, indicating that I have used my max 1 battle per year. You cannot send both gladiators into battle in the same year. Then I would flip over the top card of the fate deck, and I would inflict as much damage as this purple gladiator shows. If I had drawn a card that showed more damage that I had strength for, I would not fill in any bubbles that hadn't been available. Once you've resolved the battle, you need to decide if your gladiator died or lived. If all of your available circles are filled in, the gladiator died, and you gain the piety that's shown below their rightmost track. I would gain 2 here. If he had survived, if I had 1 more bubble available, I would gain 1 renown. Next, let's look at the gardens that are connected to the priest track. You can see that you need to make it to the 4th banner on the priest track in order to build your small garden. Once you've made it to the 4th level on your priest track, you turn in the workers and resources shown, and you fill in this entire section, gaining all of those benefits immediately. Likewise, you can build the large gardens once you've made it to the 7th spot on your priest track by turning in these workers, coloring this entire space, and gaining all of these benefits. The other type of building associated with the priest track are the temples. Once again, in order to build these buildings, you need to reach the level indicated on the banner there. And you need to construct your small temple before you can construct your medium temple, and you need to construct both of those before you can construct your large temple. However, you can start filling in these temples once they're constructed, even if the previous ones are not filled in. The way you fill in the temples is you trade in any colored worker, that's what this white worker means, and you fill in the leftmost available spot on that temple. So say I traded in a blue worker and I filled in this spot already. Of course, this is already built. It would need to be built before I do that. Then I want to send somebody else to this temple as a sacrifice, or maybe just to make a prayer. I'll send another blue. And what I would do is fill in this, receive a piety on my attribute track, and I would get a favor. I would be able to use this favor to block an attack on any of my cohorts at the end of the year. You always have to fill your temples in like this, left to right and then top to bottom once you get into the medium and large temples. So if I traded another worker to go be a sacrifice to a temple after I'd built my medium temple, I would fill in this box. I would not be able to trade another worker and then fill in this box. I would need to fill in this box, then this, and then that. That would be a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more workers before I could earn another favor. However, like I mentioned, you would not need to fill in the medium temple before you could start filling in the large temple, and you would not need to fill in the small temple before you could fill in the medium temple. They just need to be built before you can build the next size temple. The next citizens track are the operators. This is where you find the baths and the courthouse. Once again, you have a prerequisite for how high you need to be on this citizen track in order to build this building, and then you can turn in these workers to build the bath. And once you've done that, once per year, you can return to the general supply the shown number of resources in order to take a bath and wash away some disdain. What you would do is turn in the number of resources once you had reached that level on the citizen track, put down the year number, and you would circle one of the disdain on your disdain track of your first sheet, had you circled any during the attack. Once you reach the 4th level of your operators track, you can build the courthouse by turning in the workers and resources shown and receiving a renown. Once you've built your courthouse, this just allows you to gain more workers throughout the course of the year. Once you've reached the displayed level on your citizens track, you just fill in this box and take a worker from the supply and put it on your player mat. Note that you can only do 1 ruling per column per year. The last buildings that we're going to look at are attached to the patricians track. First, we've got diplomats. You can see the level that you need to reach on this track in order to use your diplomats. And once you've reached those levels, turn in the depicted resources and workers in order to send diplomats to negotiate. You'll immediately gain 1 valor and circle in 2 favor. You also need to decide which cohort you're going to use this favor for. I'm going to go ahead and choose the left. You can only choose each cohort once for each diplomacy mission. So on my next one, I might choose the middle, and my next one, I might choose the right. What that means is during an attack at the end of the year, if you draw any hits to your left cohort, now that I've chosen my left cohort to have 2 favor, I could fill this in and ignore attacks, which would also count as blocking and potentially earn you valor. And the last building that you can fill in on this right sheet is the scout map. You're using the patterns from your prospect cards and the prospect cards of your neighbors or AI characters to fill in the grid that you see here. You cannot go over the edge of the grid or not use a complete shape, but you can flip the shape any direction that you need it to go or mirror it. So if I was on the 2nd level of my patrician's track, I could send a scout by using 1 black worker and returning it to the resource pool, filling in my little horsey, and then filling in this pattern here. I would immediately gain any workers or resources that were shown underneath the icon, underneath the squares that I filled in. Once you fill in a complete row, you immediately score a valor on your attribute track. You can also pay to use the patterns of your immediate neighbor to your left or right, or the AI decks if you're using them. So I could use one of my workers to scout if I had reached my 4th level on the patrician's track by placing this on an AI deck and then filling in 4 in a line here. I would receive 1 resource for that. But since I used my worker on one of the AI's cards and I'm playing a 1-player game, I'm going to have to draw an additional card during the attack at the end of the year. So let's actually take some actions. The very first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I'm defended against any attacks for this year. I know for sure I'm going to draw 1 card, so I want to make sure that I have 1 space in each cohort filled. That way, no matter what, each of them are defended. So I'm going to turn in one of my black workers here and fill in this space. That allows me to fill in 1 space on a cohort track. Remember, these are tracks, so we're filling in left to right. I'm just going to start on the left one because at this point it doesn't matter where I start. I'm going to turn in my 2nd black worker and fill in this space. It gives me a discipline, so I will fill that in on my discipline attribute track. Now, if I want to keep going to try to get some more icons to fill in some spaces on my cohorts, I'm going to need to spin blue workers on the training ground to gain sword icons, or try to spin some civilians over here to gain black workers to get there. So we are going to put that on the back burner for now and start working on filling in our fort, since we won't be able to do anything on our wall or sippy until that's filled in. So here's our first blue worker, and we'll get him turned in and fill in that first spot of our fort. Since we just filled in this spot next to the orange one, we could also build our medium granary. I'm not going to do that yet because we still have a while to go until we need to build that medium granary. I'm going to use my second blue worker at the training grounds because it's going to get me this cohort space right away. So when you use your blue worker on the training grounds, you get the sword icon, and remember we have to put the year on this number spot because we can only do this training once per year, and that sword icon allows us to fill in the next wall guard section. So color that in, signifying that you've used it, and then go up here and color this in, and I'll go ahead and take one space in the center cohort, and now 2 of my cohorts are defended, and I just need to worry about my right cohort. Now what do we have left? We have 3 resources, 2 purple workers, and 1 yellow worker. What can we do with these? We could build on the wall and the sippy with the resources that we have, and that would earn us another yellow worker, which we would be able to use over on the citizens track to get perhaps another worker or a resource. And that's probably the direction that I'd go at this point. So I'll return this resource to the general supply, and I'm going to fill in this wall icon. That earns me a yellow worker. I'll place that on my player board. I'm looking around and seeing that I won't be able to use my purple workers for anything except mining unless I earn another blue worker to use it in combination with my purple workers. So for that reason, I think I'm going to use my purple workers this year just for mining. I just turned 1 in, and I'll take this first space. I'll turn in the second one and fill in this second space, and that earns me a resource production and another resource. So once I fill this in, I will take both of those. So next year I'll get 2 resources, and I get a resource now. I'll use the resource I just gained to build on the sippy. Now we're going to move over to the citizens tracks, and I know for sure that I need to build the market to work on my collected goods. And that will earn me another purple worker that I can't really use right now. I know for sure that I need to work on the traders citizen track because I have in-game points that are going to come from the market, and I need to make it to the 4th banner there in order to even build the market. So I'm going to turn in a yellow worker to start that. And you start on the left going right because these are tracks. That earned me a purple worker. Place that on my mat here. And for my last yellow worker, I think I'm going to start working on my performers track because that will earn me a blue worker right now, which I'll be able to use with my extra resource and purple worker to build my theater. So I'll turn in this yellow worker, fill in the first space on my performers track, take a blue worker from the pool, and then I'm going to build the theater since I made it to the first banner on the performers track. That requires a purple worker, a blue worker, and 1 resource. And since it is now constructed, I can fill this in and earn 1 renown. I'll fill in the first spot on my renown track. Now I have 1 resource left. I cannot use it to build on my wall or sippy because I haven't built the fort up that far yet. So I'm just going to use it for the theater. I can turn in 1 brick once per round to put on a show. I can only do this first one right now because I only have 1 on my performers track, but that earns me a spot on my traders track, which I know I need later, so I'll go ahead and turn that in. This is the first year, so I'll put a 1 in this number column, color this in, signifying that I took it, and fill in that space, the second space on my traders track. We're at the end of the year now because I don't have any workers or resources left. So all that there's left to do is resolve our first attack. We do that by flipping over the first fate card, and it looks like it hits to the right, which isn't great because that's the only cohort that I had left unprotected. So we take a look over on the gray banner of the current year that we're in to see how much disdain is possible to be earned. This is telling us that it's possible to earn up to 1 disdain or 1 valor if we fail to block that many hits. And we did, so we're going to earn 1 disdain right now. We mark our disdain by just completing this dotted line to form a circle on this disdain track. Just put it up in the top left. If we're able to go to the bathhouse and earn some of this favor to wash away that disdain, then we'll color it in and it won't affect us negatively at the end of the game. But as of right now, we are going to lose 1 point at the end of the game for that disdain. That card is discarded. We won't be using it again. That's the end of the first year. Set up for the next year by revealing a new fate card, drawing 2 cards from your personal deck to select as path and prospect cards, and collecting your workers and resources for the next year. After resolving the attack at the end of the 6th year, the game is over, and players tally up their points on their attribute tracks, their path cards, and subtract their points from disdain. The player with the most points wins. If there's a tie, the player with the least disdain wins, and if there's still a tie, the player who scored the most points on their path card will win. And that's everything you need to know to play Hadrian's Wall. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about this game, or if there's any games that you'd like to see me explain. Thanks for watching. See you guys again soon.